States or by imposing financial sanctions. Those who tortured Xi Yang and Li Peping should never benefit from access to the United States or to our financial system. We will hear testimony today from some of the wives who have suffered. You know, when a political or prisoner of conscience is sent off to jail and suffers, it's not just that dissident who suffers. It is the wives, the families, the extended families. Very often they're rounded up as well and interrogated and beaten. You know, we had the great Chen Chen in our audience today, his wife Wei Chen. When Chen suffered the barbarity of the Chinese dictatorship, speaking up on behalf of women who had been coerced into forced abortions in Linyi, he suffered in prison, then under house imprisonment, but his wife and his children also suffered and showed incredible bravery during that entire terrible ordeal. But he persevered, he persisted, and today is now free and speaks out very boldly and effectively on behalf of the United States in China. Pastor Bob Fu, who will be doing much of the translation today, or some of the translation, he too was incarcerated as a prisoner of conscience. But again, he persisted along with his wife as well and found their way to freedom and now speaks out boldly as part as leader of Chinese people. Finally, we'll hear from many here that Mr. Li Ming-zi, his wife, will also be providing testimony to us today. After entering mainland China in March of this year for a personal trip, Mr. Li went missing for 10 days. Chinese officials confirmed that he was being held on so-called national security grounds. Let me just say, we all know this. What a joke. People ask for human rights protections, and you're accused of national security violations. I mean, it just doesn't pass a straight face test. And it's about time that subterfuge and that lie that was fully done away with and exposed. Many fear that Mr. Li is being detained under a harsh new Chinese law to monitor and control foreign-funded NGOs, enforced earlier this year as part of the crackdown on civil society. Some of you may know I also chair the China Commission along with Marco Rubio, and every year we put out a very extensive account of the human rights abuse in China. One of the big changes, worsening changes, there are many, is the fact that the NGOs are now being, who had very limited freedom to begin with, have far less religious organizations and denominations are also being cracked down by this cruel dictatorship. Politically, let me just conclude by saying that we welcome the testimony of these wives. I hope and I pray that we will monitor to ensure that because they have boldly and in an open forum like today, that any further retaliation against their husbands or any members of their family will be watched closely. And Xi Jinping will be noticed, and I do hope the Trump administration will be bold and effective, as well as Secretary Tillerson, in raising individual cases. Because when you raise the individual cases, obviously it helps hold the others as well.
Thank you, Chairman, for your remarks and for your leadership on human rights issues worldwide. Ranking Member Bass is unable to join us here today. I'm not the superstar that she is, but I'm glad that she's allowed me to be a ranking member this afternoon in her absence. Let there be no doubt that the United States will marshal its political and economic might for the cause of human rights around the world, and that we will ask the same of our allies. As we move further into the digital age, information is more accessible than ever, which means that the suffering and harm to people is also more visible than ever. The United States and nations around the world cannot turn away from what we see, and we must take action. The tenure of Chinese President Xi Jinping has been accompanied by an increasingly harsh crackdown on any individuals and groups deemed to be subverting state power. The passage of the law on the management of foreign NGO activities raises serious concerns. According to the 2016 State Department report on human rights, the Chinese law describes foreign NGOs as, quote, national security threats and requires all NGOs to undergo a difficult registration process. In doing so, the Chinese government has greatly restricted the political space of its civil society. Chinese environmental activists, ethnic minorities, religious leaders, and political dissidents, among others, are routinely arrested and given years-long prison sentences, often for actions as trivial as posting a comment online. And the lawyers representing these individuals often suffer equally severe treatment. Chinese human rights lawyers are routinely harassed by the Chinese security apparatus, detained for extended periods of time, tortured, charged with crimes, and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Last month, President Trump met with President Xi, where they discussed economic and political issues. The meeting came at a time when China's crackdown on human rights reached new heights. While President Trump raised the issue of human rights at the presidency, Secretary Tillerson dismissed the idea of discussing human rights in a separate dialogue. The Secretary instead stated that U.S. core values of human rights would be part of U.S. economic or political dialogue with China. Yet, Secretary Tillerson was the first Secretary of State who did not attend the annual release of the State Department's Human Rights Report since the mid-1990s. We here in Congress will pay close attention to the actions of the administration and ensure they follow through on U.S. commitments to advancing the cause of human rights in China and in nations around the world. Today, we will hear from 4 brave women who continue to show their courage by testifying in front of the United States Congress. Each of their husbands has endured unjust imprisonment and inhumane treatment under dubious circumstances. They deserve our appreciation for taking great risks by providing first-hand accounts of China's increasingly restricted political environment. The perseverance of our witnesses and their families is a reminder that the fight for just and accountable government is a cause worth fighting for. It's also a reminder that progress towards a free and fair society is fragile and must be pursued every day. And of course, being a member of Congress from Texas, I want to acknowledge that one of our witnesses has been residing here. After narrowly escaping Chinese authorities in Thailand, Ms. Chan made her way to my home state. We're happy to have you here, Ms. Chan. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories and your family stories with us today. I yield back.
I'd like to introduce our distinguished witnesses and again thank you for your bravery and courage in coming forward. We'll begin first with Chen Hui-Chu, who is the wife of Christian human rights attorney Xi Yang. Xi Yang focused his professional life on helping those victimized by the communist regime's forced demolition and migration, as well as impoverished people whose rights were trampled on by the Chinese government. Because of this work, he was taken away on July 11, 2015 as part of Xi Jinping's nationwide crackdown on and I mentioned some of the horrific ordeal that he has endured in my opening, and we'll hear from his wife earlier. We'll then hear from Wang Ya-Fan, who is the wife of Han Ji-Ling, who is a human rights lawyer whose clients included villagers fighting government corruption and victims of illegal land appropriation. In 2006, Tang's license to practice law in China was suspended, after which he became involved in a nonviolent civil disobedience movement in China. In 2012, he was detained for 5 days following his work investigating the death of a human rights defender. In 2014, Mr. Tang was detained on suspicion of inciting subversion of state power in weeks leading up to the 20th anniversary of the Chinese government violent crackdown in Tiananmen Square. He was tried in July of 2015 along with 2 other prominent political advocates, and Ms. Wang is currently staying in the U.S. while she advocates for her husband's release. We'll then hear from Jin Bai-Lin, wife of John Ti-Yong. John Ti-Yong is a veteran human rights lawyer who has worked on prominent cases, including those of Chen Hui-Jen and Yao Zhejiang. He has also worked on cases advocating for the rights of AIDS and hepatitis B infected people, as well as other human rights and humanitarian cases. From 2009 to 2012, Chinese officials harassed, kidnapped, and physically tortured Tang, and on numerous occasions for his human work. In November, we traveled to Hunan to pay a visit to Chen Hui-Chu, the wife of the imprisoned human rights lawyer, who will speak momentarily. He was kidnapped while returning to Beijing on November 21st and placed under residential surveillance for alleged subverting of state power. He is now being housed. Finally, we will hear from Li Jingyu, the wife of the detained Taiwan community college worker Li Mingzi. Ms. Li graduated from the Department of Labor Relations at the Chinese Cultural University in Taiwan, where she and her husband mainly participated in social movements. Before 2014, Mr. Li began discussing Taiwan's historical experiences in